If you're doing research online, then it may be helpful to actually use Google Scholar, which is a better search engine in terms of academic research. So in this video, I'd just like to take you through what Google Scholar can do for you and show you the different options and help you make the most of Google Scholar. First step obviously is getting there, and I would suggest that you simply Google for Google Scholar or type in scholar.google.com or whatever other extension that you might have for your country. Or, and this is the third option, go to your library, and if you have some academic affiliation, then you might be able to use an academic library. My library is the library that belongs to Concordia University of Edmonton, and I went to Find Articles and More, and in the databases I came across Google Scholar. So you can probably do that too, and if you have trouble finding it, then just ask a librarian to help you out. So if I click on Google Scholar here, it's also going to take me to the same page. And you might wonder, well, why do this? But the advantage is that if I go through this process, then I actually have to log into my library to do this, and it may ask me for my credentials. But if I go through these steps, then when I find articles and there's a PDF attached that's only available through a library database, then I can access those resources directly without having to look them up separately later in my university library. So that's really advantageous. So we're looking at this screen now, and we could simply do a search, but let's first have a look at some of the different parts of the page itself. And we'll start here with metrics, and you can usually just ignore this. This gives you an indication of how journals are ranked in the field. So you can see that the journal Nature is at the very top, and if we were to do a search for, let's say, a very specific journal, so here's Speculum, that is a journal in medieval studies, you can see that it has a much lower rating, but still quite an acceptable rating. Here's another one from medieval studies. There we go. The Journal of English and Germanic Philology, which I published an article once in. And this one has a slightly lower rating than Speculum. So maybe I should have submitted to Speculum. All right, so you can see then that different journals are going to have different metrics. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but it is kind of interesting, especially if at one point you want to submit your article to an actual journal. If you're a student, that's not a big deal, but if you're a scholar, that's something to start thinking about. The next thing we'll do is we'll have a look at settings. And it's nice to tailor this a little bit so that when you do your searches, it's set up to create the best results. So here we can see how many results per page we want. We can do 10. I think 20 would be quite fine as well. If you're doing legal research, then you may want to click on Search Case Law, but otherwise I would just ignore that. I'm not that interested in patents, so I don't have this clicked. And I don't necessarily want new browser windows open all the time, so I haven't clicked this either. And I wouldn't worry too much about the bibliography manager for now. If you go to languages, I just search for any language, even if I can't read them. But if you want to narrow this down, then you certainly can. Then we have library links, and what I've done here is I've added my library, and that's great because then if there is a result that I could potentially access through the library, then it will show up and it'll create this little thing, where can I find this, or something similar. Okay, so you can add your library, or as I've said before, you can also just go directly through your library databases. So then we have a count, and we're going to skip that. We'll go to a button, and you can create a little button here. I've done this already, and you can see that it shows up in my browser in the top right corner. So if I'm just doing random things online and I want to do quickly a Google Scholar search, then I can just click on that and it will open up the search box right there. So that's pretty handy. All right, so those are the settings. Let's go back now. And the first thing we'll do here now is an actual search. So we're going to do a search for Gothic architecture. Okay, so kind of medieval architecture. You can see that it right away brings up 141,000 results. That is a ton of results. So we want to narrow it down. There are some options for narrowing it down over here, but they're not that great. And you really want to start using the advanced search options. To access those, there's this little arrow over here. In fact, even if we went back to our previous page, the arrow is here as well. Okay, so we will just type in Gothic again, go back, and now we're going to do an advanced search. You can do with the exact phrase, you can add something that would in Google normally be in quotation marks, right? So this is like searching with quotation marks. You can also do without the words, and we'll do that over here. So we're going to add England, and this is like a negative search in Google. So if you just did this in Google regularly, you would have to add a little hyphen in front. Okay, so you'd add minus England like that. But here you just type it in, and it's going to exclude results that are related to England now. So maybe we just want to look at Gothic architecture on the continent, and that would be fine. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to search just in the title of the article so that I really get articles and books that are specifically on this topic, and it's not just mentioned, in a footnote somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to ignore these other options here, but you can kind of test them out yourself. You can really restrict things in terms of who authored the article or when they were published. Okay, so, or even in which journal they were published. Okay, so let's do our search. You have to click on this search box here, and let's see what comes up. Great, so now we only have 1190 results, and we're starting to get more specific. And you can add more search search titles as well. Notice that it did add this little minus here. So if we didn't want to click on advanced search, if we just wanted to speed it up ourselves, we could always just type this in ourselves and it would have the same result. The other thing here, all in title, that indicates that we want these search terms to be in the title of the article or book. So again, you can do that yourself if you want to, just type it in like that. All right, so now we have a whole bunch of titles, and what do we do with them? Well, we could just click on one and see where it takes us, right? So this is going to take us to a different place on the web where some of these papers and titles are kind of collected, but it may not actually give us access to this particular article. In fact, as you can see here, it's hard to find a PDF, or it's hard to find something that allows us to read this article. So that's not necessarily the most useful. Let's just go back here. If we scroll down, however, you can see that this one, I can access this one. It says, where can I find this, right? And this is a JSTOR article. It's in the JSTOR database. And if I click here now, then I can actually get to this article. So there is the PDF. I can download the PDF and we're all good. All right, let's close this. And we'll go back here. So those are some of the options I have, and I can scroll through and really get familiar with all the different search results. But let's have a look now at some of these smaller buttons that we have here, and some of the other options here as well, to really make sense of what we're seeing here. First thing I'll mention is this Create Alert option, and this is kind of cool. If you click on this, you can actually set up an alert with the search terms that you have just created, and you can add more if you like. And then add your email, and then if more search results come up in the future, so new articles are written, then it will let you know. And that's really cool, because if you're doing a PhD, let's say, and you're spending 3-4 years on a particular topic, this will be great for keeping you up to date in terms of what's coming out and what's new. If we go back, you can actually go to the regular page here, and you'll find that alerts is here as well, so you can access it there as well. All right, we're gonna have to go do our search again, and there we go. Now if we look underneath these different titles, so let's just look at the JSTOR one here, then we have some other options. One of these options is cite, and this is really cool. You can just cite it in whichever format you want. Although I should note that these formats are not always up to date. So for instance, the MLA now has the 8th edition, which has been out for almost a year as of now, and that can change. And this has not been updated yet, but I'm sure it will in the future. All right, so you can cite, that's great. You can also save. All right, so save sends it to your library. And we're not going to do that right now, but I'll show you the library in a second. You can look for related articles, and you can also look for which article cited this one. So that allows you to find more recent research in the field. And there's a whole list of these with their own links. So that's really cool. You can tell that I'm excited by this, I guess. Okay, so next thing we'll do then is we'll actually have a look at the library. So we'll go to My Library. And there are a number of cool things to see here. First of all, we have My Citations. And My Citations shows up elsewhere as well, including on the main page. And My Citations allows you to keep track of your own articles and books that you have published, and then you can also see who has cited them. So if I click on My Citations here, it'll tell me, what my citation index is, who has borrowed or copied or quoted from the articles that I have written. So that's kind of cool, and you may want to do that for your own articles if you're actually publishing. You can also click on Cited by Me and set this up properly. You may have to follow up on a few steps. And what's neat about this is that these are articles and books and so on that I have cited in my research. And so as soon as you import these, it populates the whole list, and now you can go through and it's fantastic. I mean, you can sort of search and go through these different articles and so on and access them again, and so it imports this whole library of stuff that you have cited in published work. So pretty cool. Then we have trash. You can delete things and stick it there. But we also have these labels that we can create. And that's neat as well, because when we do new research, then we want to be able to organize that research. And you can probably already see that a lot of this is very similar to your inbox in Gmail, right? If you use Gmail for your emails, Google Scholar is actually very similar in the way it's set up. So let's go back to my library. And what I have done now is I have this label Gothic Architecture, which I have created. And when I clicked on Save before, so that was one of the options in our search column, once we had the results, then it'll show up here, and then I can label it. Actually, why don't we do that for a second just to see how this works. So let's do our search again. Here we go. And we'll click on Save. So I have saved one already, but we can click on Save. And now it saves it. And now if I go to my library, there it is. And then I can label it if I want. And I'm going to label it as Gothic Architecture. Apply. Go to my label Gothic Architecture. And there's another one. Okay. And if I click on Manage Labels, then I can really add more labels and change all of these things. So a ton of different options that you can use. We'll go back here for a second. And as you use it, you'll be able to go back and forth between different parts of Google Scholar more effectively. But I hope this really introduces you to the main functions and the main uses of Google Scholar.